So hi, everybody, and a very warm welcome to episode 103 of Level Up, 60 minutes of live Q&A, where your questions and votes really do drive the show. A warm welcome to everybody. Do let our social team know your name and the city where you are joining from. It's really great to get everybody involved. Now then, we have Shanice and Adriana and Ella, who are all online, and they're going to be posting a link into the chat so that you can vote up the questions that you would most like answered by the panel, and of course to add your own. We live stream Mondays at 8 and Fridays at 2 p.m, both UK time, to YouTube and LinkedIn. And if your question is selected, your name will of course appear in the credits at the end of the show. So do get yours in early and stay with us to see that happen. I can already see the team kind of joining in online. So it's great to welcome everybody today. Now, today we're going to be talking about something which is, I think, an intrinsic part of everybody's working life now, which is online meetings, and in particular, how to look good and sound amazing. I think few of us really anticipated how the pandemic would fundamentally change the proportion of online meetings that we were participating in. And as we get closer to the third anniversary of the impact of COVID-19, it's good to actually take a little stock of where we're at and where are we going to, what's the direction of travel for online meetings and how to get the best out of them. How we sound, of course, and how we look really does impact our own credibility, our personal brand, if you like, and ultimately influence how our clients and our colleagues respond to what it is that we have to say. Now, joining us today are a panel of folks who work across industries, time zones, and business cultures. So let's jump in and meet them. Stephan Brendel is the regional lead for Europe here at APMG and has in-depth experience in the professional training industry and a commensurate communicator. He's an active participant in a whole variety of different professional communities around the world, and of course a regular contributor here on Level Up as well. Welcome back to the panel, Stephan.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks for the invitation. I'm looking forward to talk about something that usually only happens in the background for us, and it's not about the real content to make that content. Very much looking forward.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to dip into, your experience and your knowledge as we go along the way. Hemant Jain is an accomplished life coach and change consultant who focuses on the people aspects of managing change in challenging multi-site environments. He's an accomplished author in his own right, and he seeks first to understand before offering advice. So welcome to Level Up, Hemant. It's brilliant to have you on the panel.
Thank you, Nick.
Okay, Ron Leeman is a regular panelist here on the show and works exclusively. Very dapper hat, Ron. Thank you so much for.
You're welcome
for wearing that. Okay, very good. He works exclusively online now with his clients, enabling them to adopt practical and pragmatic solutions to addressing organizational change. He's an award-winning consultant, and he leverages the best of technology to really help him connect with people. Welcome back to the panel, Ron.
Thank you very much for having me, and I hope you don't mind me dressing up for the occasion, but it is all about looking good and sounding good on Zoom. So I thought I'd just, I call it, have a little bit of a change, but I will be taking this off in a minute when the questions start getting asked.
All right. Well, you put us to shame, actually. I'm feeling a little underdressed now. So there we go. Nigel Mercer is next. He leads APMG's business development work, of course, in Africa and in North America. And he uses video conferencing all of the time as a tool to discover, connect, and develop new business. Nigel has developed, I think it's fair to say, his interest from a background in audio engineering and sound to expand into all kinds of technical aspects of live event production and live streaming. Welcome back to in front of the camera, Nigel, for a change.
Thanks, Nick. It's always good to be on this side of the camera for a change. And I think we have a lot of topics to talk about today, so it should be a really interesting show.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much indeed. Mart Rovers completes our panel. He's an early adopter of new technology and particularly those that support him in his mission as a leadership consultant. He and his team at INTERPROM are creating a new level of online presence, both in Europe and also in the USA, to deliver real value to his client base. So welcome back to Level Up, Mark. Great to see you.
Thanks so much, Nick, for having me. I look forward to the questions from our viewers. And I look forward to sharing, indeed, parts of my journey in the online world, the Zoom world.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much indeed today. I've got a little bit of a dry throat today, everybody, so I'm going to be taking a sip of some water in a moment. Our question master, though, for today is Suchitra Jacob, and she joins us from the beautiful garden city of Bangalore in India. Although I understand at the moment, Suchitra is a little bit wet. Is that right?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Nick. Yes, it is wet. It's been raining quite consistently for the past couple of days. So, yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, I do hope that you're managing to keep above the water level at any rate. I know that, when you get kind of heavy downpours and things in many countries, including our own, it can be very impactful. So fingers crossed for all of that. So now, look, I can see that we've got a lot of people online already. So thank you for joining in and jumping into the chat, everybody. So please do that. Let us know the city that you're coming from, all right, that you're joining from today. In the meantime, Suchitra, let's crack on, if we can, please, and take our first question.
We have a question from a LinkedIn viewer. Looking good and sounding good are sometimes hampered by the quality of the technology used. What does the panel use when hosting an online session?
Interesting. Okay, so Nigel, why don't you start us off and then we'll hear from Ron.
Sure, Nick. So I think when hosting an online session can be a sort of a misleading question there. I think it depends on what kind of online session that you're trying to host. Okay? First of all, if you're doing a live stream, you probably would use very different equipment, or perhaps use different equipment to the ones that you would use if you are, perhaps using a Zoom or Teams meeting, right? But in general, before we get into the details of it, a good quality microphone, a good quality camera, and a wired connection are the basics that you should be starting out.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Ron, your thoughts, please. Then we'll hear from Hemant.
Yes, absolutely. I like change management. I like to keep it simple. So all I use is this, and the laptop audio, basically. And I do all of my sessions online, my training and my trusted advice and webinars, etc. And occasionally it has failed me. That's more of the connectivity as opposed to what I actually use as kind of the hardware. So keep it simple as far as I'm concerned.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Great advice. Hemant and then Stephan.
Yes. I think connectivity is the one underlying factor which drives how well you are able to present, because if your audience is not able to hear you at times or not able to see you at times, the connectivity might be an issue, and it could be at either end. So you need to make sure that the connectivity at your end is stable. Speed can vary. You could be on a 10 Mbps connection or a 100 Mbps connection. It may not change much how well you are presented if the connectivity is not consistent. Even a 100 Mbps connection can drop at times, and that is the time you will lose your the audience will lose your sound, etc. So having that as a bare minimum basic. If your connectivity is not great, just upgrade and see how you can get a better connectivity. If you have multiple providers in your area, you might have to experiment with that also. If you're facing problem of getting disconnected or connectivity issues with one, switch to another one if that is an option. Once that is sorted, then devices at your end can enhance it. But the basic connectivity would have to be taken care of as the first step to online meetings, presentations, or any kind of performance you are doing online.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Stephan, your thoughts on this one?
And a lot of good things have been said already, but what's really true, and everybody should keep that in mind, is audio comes over video. the audio is the most important part of it, and that's what we're most struggling with very often. To use the right microphone, which also means that if you use your equipment in an online session, there are a lot of things probably you can save on, but never save on the audio, and never, well, in a way, never save on the video as well. Laptop cameras are not suitable for all kinds of things. It's particular because they usually have just an autofocus. There's nothing you can zoom in and out. And if you're hosting an online session, you probably need a more sophisticated environment if it's, let's say, a hybrid training situation. But I suppose we come to that later on. But in general, just keep always an eye on the audio.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Some great advice. I think, look, I mean, one of the things that we can all do is to make sure that we present ourselves in the very best possible way for whichever platform we're using. So let's talk about platforms first in this. And I'm going to come back to the panel for your thoughts on different platforms. In my role, I go with the platforms that the customers use. So sometimes I'm on WhatsApp, okay? And I must admit, I've migrated from my phone to the desktop version of WhatsApp because it allows me to use my setup that I use for this call and pretty much every other call. So sometimes I'm there, sometimes I'm on Zoom, sometimes I'm on Microsoft Teams. I'm less on Skype now than I used to be. That was the platform of choice for many years, but it seems to kind of be subsiding. I think when Microsoft bought it and they brought out that truly dreadful product, which was a sort of a business version of Skype. It was awful. So, less so on that platform. But the one thing that is consistent, as other colleagues have said, really, is how you present yourself. What is your connection, your connectivity? What is your audio like? And what is your video like? Those three things I can control. The platform is largely driven by the client. Anybody else's thoughts on going where the audience is in that way and responding to the client? Nigel, go ahead.
Yeah, Nick, just on that, some platforms are a lot better than others when it comes to recognizing the hardware that you use, providing better audio, better video. I think frame rates have a lot to do with it. People should bear in mind that camera frame rates versus presentation frame rates are very, very different. If you're looking for a good frame rate on a camera, you need to have a good camera. Most of the presentation tools out there are optimized for a presentation rather than for actual camera use. So you need to do a little bit of investigation in that before you go and purchase some equipment. But there is really a lot of equipment that will work. But coming back to the basics, once again, make sure that you've got good audio, make sure that you've got good video. I agree with Stephan, audio is always more important than video. If people can't hear you, then you haven't really got much in place there. But coming back on the different platforms, there are so many platforms these days, including webinar platforms. All of them usually handle audio and video in roughly the same way. But yeah, some of them are, let's say, not equal to others.
Okay, Stephan, your thoughts on this? Then we'll go to Mart.
I think it's also a matter of purpose. So like you said, Nick, when you were doing a WhatsApp call, I think that's fine for a one-to-one conversation. I remember very early in the pandemic times when somebody wanted to have a Zoom call for a confidential customer conversation, I was kindly recommending to go to Microsoft Teams or somewhere else because of the security issues that Zoom had in the beginning. So purpose has to be in mind. What is it that you're doing? One platform might be completely fine for having a conversation, and another one might be, and it might be completely stupid to use that if you let's say running a training session. So I think purpose should be a driving factor on what platform to use.
Yeah, really, really good thing to have in mind. What do you need to get done? And then if you can, select the platform to match that objective. Absolutely true. Thank you so much. Mart and then Hemant.
Nick, I'm with you on, the early Skype days. That's what I was using. I was just traveling too much and I wanted to push more business to do more online. So early days, Zoom immediately caught my attention because of its actually in those days richness of features that came with it. The things you could adjust, even look better by doing it did touch-ups, right? Things like that. But even the training, what was helpful from the beginning is that you can display the slide on one side of the screen and the other side the next slide, plus your notes, and it was all there on one screen. Just from a teaching perspective, that's enormously helpful to keep the flow going. You don't have to memorize all your stories. You just can put some notes in there. So those little features were enormously helpful and still are, besides all the other things that you can now do with the Zoom meetings.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And we'll get on to talking about some of those features a bit more in a few minutes. Hemant, your final thoughts on this one before we move on?
Yeah, so most of my thoughts already expressed in terms of the flexibility of Zoom to allow you to share a slide, or even now you have a whiteboard on which you can actually write and people can contribute and so on. I think one of the things which I've recently observed is people, when they just want to do a one-way communication, let's say even in terms of teaching, if they want to just share a short video of what people want to do, they are shooting the video using a camera and just sending that video rather than getting on a call and struggling with either Zoom and connectivity, laptop camera, and things like that. The other is, even within Zoom, I've seen people trying to run the meeting from the laptop, but as a primary camera, rather than going for a webcam, they have started to use their phones. They will have their phone, and most of our phones have extremely good cameras. They use that on a stand to take their video and talk to it, because then the picture is extremely clear. So these are two variations I've recently seen happening.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Some really good advice, and also some nice, experiences more recently of how to integrate all of the kit that we've got together. Whether it's a phone or whether it's a webcam or even things like a digital SLR camera as well. Excellent, very good. Suchitra, I can see some new questions coming in. Let's move on, please, if we can. We'll take our next question.
We have a question from Shilpa. I prefer using a natural background rather than a virtual one. Any tips on how to make my background pleasant for the viewer?
Okay, Ron, start us off on this, then we'll hear from Nigel.
Okay, I'm going to be a bit forward now. I'm going to say I hate virtual backgrounds. I just do not like them, because every time you move, one part of your body disappears. If you're making hand gestures, they disappear. Yeah. So I don't use virtual backgrounds. What I do use on occasions, as an example, when I'm shooting my YouTube videos, for which I actually use my mobile device, by the way. Yeah, I have a couple of hanging banners behind me that are on stands. Okay, and I have them for my YouTube videos. I have them for my webinars, whichever webinar I'm presenting, and they're just a simple way of cutting out some of the background and avoiding the awful use of these virtual backgrounds.
Well, I'm certainly with you there, Ron. Thank you so much indeed. Nigel, your thoughts, please, about improving, the background and what that can look like. Then we'll hear from Stephan.
Yeah, absolutely. Ron, I'm with you on the virtual backgrounds, okay, for sure. So a great suggestion from Ron, if you've got some banners, pull-up banners, they work really well. But another really cheap, cost-effective option is to use backdrop paper. So if you don't want people to see the private area behind you, or your lounge, or just can't be care to clean it up, this stuff that I'm using behind me is something called Savage Backdrop Paper. And Savage Backdrop Paper is relatively inexpensive. You can buy it in literally hundreds of different colors. It comes in a really long roll, which you can cut down to suit the length or width of your room, buy two stands, or you just simply mount it on the wall, and you can roll it down, roll it back up, and get it out the way again. So the other option, if you don't even want to do that, is just make sure you've got a reasonably neat environment. It's really nice sometimes to see people's backgrounds, I've seen some lovely, showcase homes, should we say, in the background. But, without trying to turn this into a fine and country magazine shoot, you don't need to do that, right? Yeah, just make it look neat and clean and easy. That's all you need.
Yeah, I think it's probably best to put your washing away in these circumstances if you want a professional image. Absolutely right. Stephan, your thoughts, please, and then Hemant.
I would agree with Ron. A virtual background can be very distracting unless you have a green screen or something even that makes it easy for the AI not to make your body disappear, right? I think it's rather distracting, and I prefer natural background. Now, the only issue I see with the natural background is if you look at behind me, you see books. So there is a slight association. I might be a constant reader. When I look at Ron's background, I see art. So I think Ron is an artist. Whatever you want to, how you want to present yourself, probably is something you have to look at. So what I like to do also is put some flowers next to me. And then when I look at all this, I say, well, it's even too much stuff on there to distract. So I like the idea of having something in there, but not too much. But if I can, I avoid virtual backgrounds. That's my recommendation.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Hemant?
Absolutely. As you can see, my background, plain simple, no distractions. Wouldn't mind a painting or a small potted plant. So that is the preferred and go-to background for a speaker on video. I want to talk about virtual backgrounds though. Yes, they have their set of problems, which could be reduced if you use a green screen in the background, and then your hands will stop disappearing. But it needs to be done right. It needs to have the right kind of lighting also in place so that it works fine. It is preferable to use a virtual background when you want to project an identity across speakers. So if you have let's say a conference, and conference will have several speakers, and you want to you want to drive home the brand and the identity of the conference and the organizer, and also want to highlight some of the sponsors because you have actually taken money from them, and that's a selling point that your logo will be appearing on the screen all the time. That's a great way to do the virtual backgrounds, and I've seen many events doing virtual background. As an individual, you can use a virtual background for your own branding. For my coaching sessions, I often use a virtual background with my logo and name in one corner. That helps. But then I've realized that, yes, it does offer a little bit of distraction. And in my coaching session, it's my client, so I don't need to do further branding. I would rather do it in sessions where there is external audience, where I need to do branding. So you will have to decide where the virtual background is important as a branding tool for you and use it. Otherwise, if possible, avoid it because it does create a distraction. That's all from my end.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And, there's quite a few things here, really. I think virtual backgrounds were brought in largely to help people feel more confident and have a greater degree of privacy over their home environment. And not everybody has a separate place to work from, and so creating that little, kind of professional space in what is a multi-use room, can be a bit of a challenge sometimes. But I would say, to echo what the panel has said, be authentic to yourself. Find a little corner, because the field of vision actually for a webcam is relatively narrow. So it's not going to, if you position yourself, it's all about positioning. You position yourself in front of the camera correctly, then you will be fine. How can you make it more pleasant for the viewer? Well, one of the ways is to use lighting. So the background that Nigel is using, the backdrop paper that he's using, is a particular shade of grey. I think it's 15% grey. And that means that if you have a coloured light, you can push coloured light onto it and it will change colour. So it will go from being grey to becoming green or blue, or have a hue of red or whatever. I'm quite old, so I generally look better if the background behind me is darker than I am. that can make it look a lot more pleasant for your audience. Okay, so consider things like that. All right. Stephan's lighting is quite warm, so he looks quite warm. So his face is lit in a warmer fashion. My face is lit in a cooler fashion. So the temperature of the lighting that you use can alter the way in which you are perceived. So using things like this. Using lighting is one of the ways in which you can pull off some great tricks. I'm actually in a really tiny room in my home. It's what was in England, we would call it the box room, the smallest bedroom in the house. And if I stretch out my arms, I can touch all four walls. Okay, it's very tiny. But I achieved separation from the wall behind me. I could not use a green screen because I'm too close. But I achieve a little bit of separation by having a lamp washing down the wall behind me, which pops me out slightly in front of the wall, whereas in reality, I'm almost up against it. So there you go. So there's a few little different ideas that you can try yourself with things you have around the house. You know, a little reading lamp for a cooler look, a lamp that you would have perhaps in your living area with a shade on it for a warmer look. All of these things will make it more pleasant for your viewers. Very good. Let's move on. If we can, Suchitra, we'll take our next question.
We have a live question from Diane. What makes a virtual presentation effective?
All right, Ron, you're a strong communicator. Let's talk about the effectiveness of presenting virtually.
Yes, I've done many. I've lost count of how many I've actually done over the years since I've gone virtual. But for me, it's very, very simple again. It's very, very simple. Be yourself. Okay. Yes, you're following slides. You've got a set of slides that you've concocted, but you've concocted those set of slides to match the way you would like to present it. So the slides reflect you. So just be yourself. And it's as easy as that. Don't try and, be full of hairs and graces and stuff like that. If you're yourself, if you're authentic, people will recognize that. And that's exactly what I work on. Kind of don't really change my way of presenting when I'm doing webinars or when I'm doing training or when I'm doing my YouTube. Well, I kind of do when I do my YouTube videos, but when I'm doing webinars and when I'm doing training, I don't change. I'm just me, myself, and I.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Let's move next to Haman, and then we'll hear from Nigel.
Yeah, I think the rules of engagement with the audience have been something we've been talking about in the pre-online era also. In a typical workshop or a meeting, the way you would engage your audience was to interact with them, make them respond to questions you're asking, change the mode of presentation from talking to some slides, or even use a occasional video when you're doing it. I think the same rules also apply to an online medium of keeping engaging the audience, because that's where the effectiveness of the presentation comes. I remember this great quote I recently heard is that the objective of making a presentation is not to make the presentation. The objective is to send a message across and ensure that the audience understands what you're trying to communicate. And that effectiveness comes from using multiple channels. The chat in the Zoom or Teams or any other platform that you're using is an effective way of engaging audiences in an online meeting, because in an online meeting, having people respond on voice can be a bit troublesome, because you've got a lot of people and all of them trying to respond will become a problem. So chat, if you just ask them to post their responses or even a few words as a response in the chat, it's a great way of engaging them. And while you are a primary speaker at times and other people choose to remain off video, you don't really know whether they are there or not, or they've wandered off in their house. So having people engage on chat is a good way of ensuring people are awake, near the system, and also engaged with you and listening to you. That's all from my side.
All right, very good. Thanks so much indeed. Nigel, and then Mart, please.
Yeah, look, I agree with everything that's just been said. Yeah, everything is absolutely valid. Couple of points, though, that you might want to think about. Preparation is key, number one. If you aren't prepared for your presentation, it's unlikely you're going to deliver an effective presentation, Diane. The second thing to look at is know the tool set that you have at your disposal. Many people go into a presentation not really understanding the techniques, the tips, the tools that can be used within the platform that you're using. So think about using emoticons, encourage camera use. This is all about driving engagement from the audience, right? So try to encourage them to keep their cameras on if possible. Try to encourage them to use the polling that you are going to put in, use the whiteboards. There are lots and lots of tips and techniques that you can use to do that. The other thing I would say is please try to avoid lengthy presentations with lots of text. Nothing puts people to sleep quicker than long presentations with lots of text. You will perhaps need some text, obviously, to explain it. But if you're just going to do text, then you might as well send them the presentation. They can read it, right? It's as easy as that. Try to use relative graphics that will help. Building graphics one on top of the other, layering them. Those techniques always help. And just coming back to what Ron said, I can't agree more. Be yourself. Yeah? Being yourself really makes a big difference. The more relaxed you are, the more engaging you're likely to be.
Right. Thank you very much indeed. Mart, your thoughts, and then Stephan.
Great question, Diane, and a great answer so far. Like to add that making eye contact is enormously important. I mean, if you're looking a different direction because you happen to have your screen over there, it's really annoying for the audience. So make eye contact as much as you can. The other part is that definitely build in enough breaks, especially when you do, multiple hours of sessions. Build breaks so people can get up and move around and they don't have to sit for hours and hours. That's also important. And then something I noticed when I teach classes and I have 20 people attending, there's always 7, 8, or 9 hiding. Right? They don't turn on the cameras, so you don't hear them, you don't see them. And what I learned doing is I put their names down and I keep track. All right, I heard this person, didn't hear that person. So guess what? I'm going to put this person on the spot, right? To get them, to be with me. So as in, are you still there? Sometimes they're not there. Can I put in one more anecdote? Is that okay? About people
Of
not
course,
being
yeah.
there. So there was a moment, this was before COVID. Lady didn't turn on the camera. And a hard time. All right, everybody else turned on the camera. She didn't, but she was there. She said, second day of the class, all of a sudden a camera popped on, and she didn't know. And the camera was literally pointing upwards. Strangely enough, having her in full screen, and she was standing on the ladder, and she was literally painting the daughter's bedroom ceiling. As in, oops.
This was during a training course. This was during a training course.
Right, exactly.
Wow.
And she of course didn't mean that, and of course apologetic and all that. She barely passed. Guess why, right? But anyway, yeah, that was as in. I keep telling the story, and people turn on the camera. Guess what? That does help.
Very good indeed. Well, that's a first for me. I haven't had anybody actually redecorating their home.
Right.
At least. Well, I don't know. Maybe they have. I'm not sure. Stephan, your thoughts. Then we'll come back to Hemant for another little thought.
Yeah. So as Mart already said, eye contact. Well, if you have right position in camera, you actually can make eye contact on those online sessions. But the most important part is how would you carry out a non-virtual presentation? It's like what Nigel said, avoid text as much as you can, use pictures, professional speakers. That's what they're doing. Now, if you look at online, and people usually tend to switch off their cameras when there comes to presentation part and not the conversation part, you have to think of like this must be like a thrilling YouTube video. So it's even more important how you speak. It is more really a speech because you don't have the eye contact. You even feel like you're talking into a black monitor. So to overcome that, imagine you are the news speaker who speaks to millions of people at the same time. Like, get that nervousness by yourself and talk like you've never talked before. to make a virtual presentation effective. Reach people with the camera switched off and maybe painting the wall at the same time, which I have, if I can say that. I recently joined a meeting where I was sitting on a bicycle while there was a presentation mode. And that was good for my health. Yeah, and I was listening and nobody noticed, which is good.
Okay, I hope you weren't amongst heavy traffic at the time. Let's move on. Hemant, your thought, please.
Yes. On the eye contact, it's been always a very important thing, even in face-to-face meetings, and now even more in virtual meetings. Our tendency is to look people in the eye. And the problem is, in the virtual meetings, people are on the screen, the camera is above them. So if I'm looking at the camera, I am maintaining eye contact with people who are trying to look at me. But the moment I look at people on the screen, I'm no longer having eye contact with my audience. Now, this takes a bit of practice, a bit of conscious thinking, that I no longer have to look at my screen, but at the camera. So it requires a bit of conscious effort.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Now, what makes a virtual presentation effective? There are 3 golden rules. First of all, abandon bullet points. All right, get rid of them. Okay, you don't need them. Your speaker notes should be speaker notes. They should not be written on the slide. All right. If you're going to put something on a slide, make sure it adds some value. Make it a chart. Make it, a visual, a diagram. Sketch something. Get something that illustrates and reinforces your point. There is no need for bullet points on the screen in the vast majority of situations. It's just lazy. That's the first thing. Second thing is, I would say, is balance up your presentation. Instead of doing 80% slides and 20% questions, turn it around the other way. Have much more time for questions. Okay, questions engage people. Broadcast largely does not. You have no way of knowing realistically if people are paying attention. Whereas if you have a balance of content and questions and you mix that up and you engage people through that, it's much, much more effective. And thirdly, use the technology wisely. Microsoft Teams is awful for people who join late. They're very disruptive to the rest of the audience, particularly if they're from outside of your tenant domain. So if they're coming in as a guest, they're announced, it pings and bongs, they invariably apologize and so on. It's really disruptive. So use a breakout room for the main presentation, get people to join the meeting, and then when they've joined, move them into the breakout room. All right, instead of having the whole presentation going on in the main meeting. It's far less disruptive. Your blood pressure will be lower. The audience will be more fully engaged. And rather like a theatre, if you turn up late for a theatre, right, they don't just let you walk in front of everybody else. Okay, they wait until a break and then they take you properly to your seat, all right, so that you are less disruptive. Think about that a little bit as you're managing your meetings. That will help your virtual presentation be much more effective just by accepting that some people will be late, some people will disrupt, and some people will even be on a ladder or on an exercise bicycle at different points. So do think about that, how best to engage them. Really good. And thank you, panel, for those very authentic and real world examples. Excellent. Let's move on, Suchitra. We'll take our next question if we can.
We have a question from George. Is it a meaningful idea to use only visible clothing?
All right. I think we should answer this really carefully. Stephan, start us off and then Ron.
Yeah, I saw this question before. First of all, it's a matter of the mindset. It's not a matter of the clothing, it's a matter of the mindset. So when you think you go on a meeting, just using a facade, there's probably the wrong mindset for that. So I think you should clothe yourself the way you would when you go to a natural meeting. So I don't think it's a meaningful idea to just use visible clothing, because visible clothing means probably didn't get up in time. You just half through the morning when's a morning session, and therefore it is very important that you realize what is your mindset when you step into a meeting. Are you properly prepared? And you have the right thoughts, and that is an expression also of your closing.
Yeah, really good point, isn't it? It's part of our mental preparation, if you like, to get into that zone, the right zone for the meeting itself. Ron, final thoughts on this, then we'll move on.
Yeah, I think we should all stand up and prove what we're wearing. No, seriously. It depends on you as an individual. And to an extent, it depends on where you're working from. I work in a hot country, Thailand. Yeah. So I admit, apart from this nice looking, wonderful, slick shirt, I'm wearing shorts. Yeah. Otherwise, it would be too hot for me. Okay. And even when I'm training, when I'm doing my YouTube stuff, I wear shorts because it's comfortable. And if you're sitting there for an hour, hour and a half, however long it may be, then comfort above all is what matters. And again, so long as you only see what's up, from your sort of chest downwards or upwards, it's fine. But then you have to be careful if you have to move away from your camera to make sure that it's either your camera's switched off or whatever. Otherwise, I've seen so many videos of people who forgot to switch their camera off and they're in their pardon the expression, underwear and stuff like that. And it's whatever you feel comfortable in.
All right, thank you very much indeed. I think you both make really good points about often it's part of our kind of social, psychological preparation, all right, for how we present ourselves is, getting dressed for the activity. So I've worked a lot outside of my day job with the military, and they love dressing up. They have kit for cold weather. They have kit for hot weather. They have kit for, going up high in the sky. They have kit for going, under the ocean. They just love a dressing up box. They really, really do. And so dressing for the purpose in mind is absolutely right and proper. And to Ron's point, in Brisbane and also in those countries which are, up closer to the equator, you've often got an environment where the business dress code is very different, to that you would have in the frozen wastelands of Northern Europe. Okay, so it's a matter of fitting in with, the cultural environment that you're in, I think. Very good, though. An interesting question. And thank you very much, George, for posting it. All right, let's move on. Suchitra, we'll take our next question, please.
We have a question from Nick. I have a budget of 500 USD. What equipment would the panel recommend I invest in first?
Now, I'm going to admit this is me, okay? I've put this question in and I genuinely was interested in each of your thoughts about where you would spend the money, okay? 500 US dollars is quite a lot of money, but it's nowhere near the thousands that some people spend. So, Nigel, why don't you start us off? Where would you think about applying $500?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of equipment that you could buy for $500. That's for sure. So let's just quickly start with some of the cameras. If we were to look at something like this, which is a Logitech C922 webcam, right? The C922 webcam, it's a really nice little camera, works really, really well. Yeah. So that's one option. And I think that those cameras come in at around I think it was $80 mark-ish. So it's not really a huge budget spend. The next option you could go for is the Brio. Now, Logitech Brio is a very, very nice camera, but that camera, I think, comes in at around about the $180 mark from memory. So, yeah, I think it's about $180 so that is another option that you could look at, from a camera perspective. I think if you've got a little bit more budget available to you, you could probably look at something like the Insta360. Insta360 is a really, really nice camera. That camera, though, I think, Nick, you can explain a little bit more about how that camera operates, but this camera does all sorts of things, right? It's even got gesture control on it and tracking. So it'll follow you around everywhere. if you needed to, you can make things smaller using the pinch movements and stop. It'll zoom out. And that can be really, really very handy. So if we're still under the $500 mark at this point, getting close though, if you're using the Insta360, you do need some sound. So, when you're talking about microphones, the Rode NT-US or NT-USB microphones, those are really, really good. Those are not that cheap though. I think we're talking about $150 for those. You can get slightly better or cheaper microphones, not better, but cheaper, like the NT-USB Mini. That's a very, very good microphone as well. NT-USB Mini, they are USB powered. One thing to note is that with the other Rode that I mentioned, the normal NT-USB, you need a mixing desk. It's an XLR-based microphone, so you need to have a sound interface mixing desk. And, roughly if you add all of those together, pick one of the cameras, pick one of the microphones, you're well under your $500. But there's one very short point I wanted to add. It comes back to the previous question. Keeping eye contact. One of the easiest ways to do that is to buy yourself a cheap teleprompter. The cheap teleprompters, they really are not expensive these days, and they work on your tablet. So you can put your iPad on it, and you're always maintaining eye contact. So it's showing you the full screen behind it, and you don't need to look away to find the other monitor or look for your chat functions over somewhere else. So those are all options.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. I've just added a couple of things to my shopping list now. So, okay, very good. Thank you, Ron. Your thoughts? How would you spend $500?
I wouldn't. If it's not broke, why try and fix it? Come on. I use earbuds, cheap but not nasty. I use my laptop. As webcam, and I kind of think that I look okay-ish. Yeah. But it was interesting. I saw that, Nigel. I saw that. It's kind of interesting what you say about teleprompter. I use a teleprompter for my YouTube videos, and there's an online teleprompter, so you don't have to buy one. It's free, and I use a free online teleprompter. So maybe I'm a cheapskate, but as I said, if it works, why try and fix it?
Yeah, no, I think that you're right, and I think what we're trying to do is a lot of folks. The reason for posting the question, Ron, and we'll come to Stephan next, is that a lot of folks are looking for guidance. There's so much choice now that they actually want us to be able to say, look, we've tried this or that, and these are the ones that we would recommend. Stephan, your thoughts on a kind of medium budget $500 US?
Don't want to anchor too much, but as you said, Nick, people want to have guidance, and I think Nigel gave some guidance on camera. So this is not product placement, I know this, but it's important for people to understand, because there's so much offerings available, and then things posted like, this is what this wonderful device for 15 grand can do, and it can't in the end. Yeah, so things like make it 1080p camera, I think it has been mentioned before. Yeah. That is important, and audio, there is no such technical guidance where you can just recommend a brand, and like Nigel said, so the Rode, that makes sense. It is indeed, with $500, it's quite a lot, in particular when you invest in it first. Yeah, it's also to maintain these devices, I think it's important, so you know how to handle them on your computer. But in general, I think guidance Nigel was given. I would absolutely agree on that one.
All right. Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much. The other thing that I would suggest to you, if you are using an iPhone, I'm not sure if it's available on Android, it may be, is an app called Filmic Pro. Filmic Pro turns your phone camera into a really useful device, and it provides something called clean HDMI out, and that is a fabulous thing if you understand that. It basically removes all of the phone overlays and gets rid of anything which is on the screen. And even if you're teaching and you just want a second camera that you can pick up and move around, connect an iPhone to something like an Apple TV, and use that as part of your mixing, and you will not regret it. Filmic Pro is a really, really super app to use for that kind of thing. All right, very good. Let's move on. Let's pick up the pace panel. We might be able to fit one or maybe two questions in if we're super quick.
So we have another question from a live viewer. There are many different tools when using online platforms. Example, breakout rooms, virtual whiteboards, etc. Are these now becoming too complex for users?
Okay, Hemant, start us off, please.
Okay. The tools that you use for a session have to be closely related to the actual requirement. Do you need to use the virtual whiteboard? Do you need to use the breakout rooms? When we started off, it was just plain simple Zoom meeting with everybody in the same room, no whiteboards, no breakout rooms. Then people started using breakout rooms because when you do let's say a physical training, there are times when you create groups and people discuss in groups and then they come back to the main session and present. This people wanted to replicate in the online thing, and breakout rooms are great at doing that. You cannot have 15 people discussing together. It's great to break them up into 5 groups of 3 people, put them into 5 breakout rooms, and they can discuss. So it's a great tool to use. Yes, some people are still facing challenges with how to go about using it. So as a presenter, you should first gain mastery and decide whether it's going to be easy or difficult. Virtual whiteboards, as long as you're keeping it to yourself and using it to write on the screen, it's great. But then you should have the right tools, and what is being written on the screen should be readable. You can't really scribble something and people can't read it because that becomes pretty much useless, and so on and so forth. Zoom is going to continuously add a lot of tools. You will have to evaluate whether it serves the purpose and it's easy to use for yourself as well as your users. Otherwise, don't go there.
Thank you very much indeed. Ron, briefly.
Going back to my my ethos of keep it simple, I think it's another phrase I use, which is horses for courses. If you're doing just a one-to-one, you don't need a breakout room. You don't need virtual whiteboard. You may need a virtual whiteboard, but if you are doing a session for a number of people, yes, there is probably the need for maybe the breakout rooms or virtual whiteboard. The thing is, you've got to feel comfortable, because what you're doing is you're still delivering what you're delivering, but you've still got to control what you're trying to do with your platform. So some people just might get a bit flustered when they're doing that. Yeah, but yes, as a presenter who's presented for a long time, and I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about anyone. You need to get used to these things because they do come in handy when you actually need them. But for just the odd one or two, don't worry about them. Just straight one-to-one. But for bigger audiences, yes, you will need them, and you'll need to get used to how to use them.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Nigel, your thoughts?
Yeah, just a very brief thought on what Ron was mentioning there. One way to help you control everything and make it really super simple, buy yourself a Stream Deck. It links in with most of those tools. When you want to create a breakout room, it's a single button press, off it goes. It moves things around. So a little Stream Deck helps you enormously. You don't have to clutter around with keyboards and mice and so on.
Okay, all right, excellent idea and a great advice there. And don't forget as well the pre-loved options, which are available on a variety of sales platforms, some of which are more colourful than others. Anyway, do go shopping, shop wisely, and so on. If you ever want to contact us about any of this kind of thing, you're most welcome to. We're easy to find on apmginternational.com, or you can link with us on LinkedIn as well. We're always very happy to help and share our day-to-day experience of different pieces of equipment and what value they can bring to you. Very good. Suchitra, I think we've got time to fit in one final question if we can.
We have a question from Shanice. What is the one thing I can do now to make a difference to my online presentations?
Okay, I'm going to start us off with this while the panel have a little think, and then we'll come around to each of you. The one thing that you can do right now, Shanice, is stop designing your presentation in PowerPoint. Okay, so don't jump straight in and start writing the slides. Actually, sketch an outline, use post-it notes, do whatever you want to do to kind of get a story. Once you've got a story, then you can think about illustrating it. But don't start your workflow in by trying to type something into the first slide, because that's a recipe for dull presentation. So start outside of the slideware if you can. All right, very good. Nigel, your thoughts on this one?
Shanice said tons of things to do, but as Nick said, don't start within PowerPoint. The quickest way that you will, create something that you don't want to present is by starting in PowerPoint. The easiest thing or best presentation tip I can give you is just simply start with trying to analogize what it is you're trying to say with a diagram. Okay? Do not put bullet points on the slides. We've said it already. Don't go for those 400 bullet points. It's just a nightmare. You will distract yourself and the others.
Thank you very much. Ron, what's the one thing that you could do to make a difference?
I'm going to be a party pooper now and say I actually create all of my presentations in PowerPoint straight off. Okay. Straight off. I don't make notes or anything. Okay. And I think that's probably because I've been a PowerPoint user for so many years. It's unbelievable how many years ago I started using PowerPoint. I used to use, I can't remember the name of the thing, but I converted to PowerPoint. And the other thing is, your presentation is you. And I'm just going to go back to saying, be authentic, be yourself.
Yeah, absolutely right. And by the way, my commentary earlier was not so much about creating it in PowerPoint. It was actually not creating it by typing into a slide. So you can use outline view in PowerPoint to get your, kind of story flow. My advice is, if you want an engaging presentation, it needs to be a story. And the story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And most users struggle if you jump into designing the first slide rather than thinking about the shape of the story. All right, thank you very much indeed, Ron, but I do take your point. Stephan, your thoughts, and then Mart?
Well, to sound amazing on Zoom and look good is, as we have found out, is not necessarily a technical question, it's a mindset. So amazing is more than just good. Amazing means how you come over the channel, through the wire. As Ron said, being authentic is very important, getting eye contact. Everything needs to be pushed a little bit more than you would do in a normal room to overcome the kind of barriers that the technology has given us. Thanks, Nick.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Mart, what's your one thing you would recommend?
I always think it's important that whomever is on the other side listening or watching, especially for a training class or a presentation, is that they hear their own voice. Because that usually also breaks the ice, as in they're not as afraid anymore to speak up and be more interactive and engaged in these presentations or training courses. So the sooner you can get them to speak, I think the more engagement you get from a class like that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. Hemant?
Well, unless the subject and the topic doesn't allow, smile more often and engage with your audience.
Okay, what a brilliant idea. And I do actually know Shanice, and she is a very smiley person. So I think, she wins hearts and minds, many hearts and minds by that right up front at the beginning. Very good. Thank you very much indeed, panel. Well, thank you for all of our questions today. Some really good, thoughtful input on Slido. Thank you very much, everybody. So let's hear your closing remarks then. Let's keep it brief, panel, because we're up against the clock a wee bit. Nigel, start us off, then we'll hear from Ron.
Yeah, as we're up against the clock, if anybody wants some tips, advice, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I'm happy to help.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Ron. Then Stephan?
Yeah, I've loved today's session, to be honest. Being completely online, I've actually learned quite a few things, which is great. Yeah. And I hope I've sort of given some alternative views about things as well. So thank you. And yes, I do like my hat. It's the hat I wore to my daughter's wedding in Turkey.
Well, how lovely. That's really nice. It's nice to have that authentic connection and remember those happy times. Thank you very much indeed. Stephan and then Mart.
Yeah, thanks, Nick, for the invitation today, for having me here. It was actually quite fun to exchange a few thoughts, and some things popped through my mind while we were talking and while we were answering questions. So great topic and great show today. Thanks.
Okay, excellent. And some lovely advice coming up from the audience as well. Thank you very much, Danielle, for reminding us of IK, about how important it is to, demonstrate our enthusiasm and our commitment through our facial expressions. Mart and then Hemant, please.
Thanks for having me again. Indeed, one more thing, the word that hasn't been used yet is when you present or teach, make it like a conversation. Conversation style presenting. That also maybe helps people, as in, I can just talk, like I always talk.
Absolutely. Very, very important. And Hemant, your thoughts?
Yes, to look good and sound good, I would take things in the order of get your connectivity sorted out, then look at the audio. You should sound right and people should be able to hear you. Then look at the lighting around you, how you are being lit up, and then finally you can invest in your video equipment, the cameras and so on. Everything is sorted.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you so much indeed. Suchitra, your thoughts on today's episode?
I learned a lot from today's episode, Nick. And I know we always stress on good equipment, good lighting, and we showed some great graphics for our audience. So I think that should have been quite helpful as well. So thank you to the panel for your great advice as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks very much indeed, everybody. I'd like to thank our producers online, of course, for your excellent questions today. Great job. And do watch out for your name in the credits if one of your questions was selected. Now then, let's think a little bit more about our own professional development. On our website, you can search for and find answers now to more than 1,400 questions, which is a truly comprehensive free resource for you to dip into. And don't forget to be able to listen to the audio versions of the shows on your preferred podcast platform. Thursday this week, we've got an extra episode. We've got a Connect event, actually, which is all about creating a cyber resilient enterprise. So do look that up on the apmginternational.com website. Friday, we're going to take a look at leadership and in particular, how to remain authentic as a leader without sacrificing, the person who you are or the values that you have. Monday, the 24th, we're going to be facing up to climate change as we explore how to build a business resilience plan. Subscribe to the show, everybody, and we'll send you a personal summary of what's coming up next and how you too can join us here on the panel and level up your career with APMG. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you next time. Thank you.